Greetings and welcome everyone to valortube.com. My name is Paul Lear. I am an original content provider at valortube.com and like to welcome everybody to This Week in Prophecy. And we are going to start, as usual, as best as we can when there's news in the Middle East with Jerusalem, with Israel. And this was found this week. I think it was found on October 7th out of the Jerusalem Post. Israel hints Oman is next to join Abraham Accords. So the Abraham Accords are not dead yet. In fact, I saw this today. Jared Kushner and friends were in the Middle East kind of taking a victory lap with some of the members of the Circle of Peace and the Abraham Accords. And just kind of reminding everyone, hey, this thing is not dead. Israel still thinks it's a real deal. And they seem to think, or there is a word being leaked, that they think Oman may be the next country to join the Abraham Accords. Now, go back here. Oman's right over here on the east-southeast region of the Arabian Peninsula. They would join the UAE and Bahrain. Egypt is at peace with Israel, so is Jordan. I think Morocco is, and so Sudan. But what is really interesting, so everybody's probably thinking, well, what's the Biden administration going to say about this? You will not hear this in the mainstream press of the United States, but you will hear this from the Jerusalem Post. Sustaining, let's go down here to the very bottom. You got to read all the way to the bottom of the article. Sustaining and expanding the Abraham Accords is a rare area of shared foreign policy between the Trump administration, which last year brokered the accords, and the Biden administration. So Joe Biden is on the peace train. Don't think this thing's dead yet. Of course, now the press is going to think Biden's just some wonderful foreign policy expert when Oman decides to join, when they decide, if they decide to join the Abraham Accords. And we'll close with the quote. I really hope that when we meet, if not before his time next year, we will be able to talk about our countries that have joined. So talking about Israel and Oman joining the Abraham Accords. So we'll see. But anyhow, don't kid yourself. The Trump administration and the Biden administration agree on the Abraham Accords. You'll never hear that in the United States press, but that's what they think in Israel. That's probably what it's been leaked to them. So, and then from there, we're going to take a pretty good look at China. And we're going to spend some time on China. And China is significant because of Revelation 9, verse 13. Then the sixth angel blew his trumpet, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. Skip down to, well, I should read it straight through. So the four angels who had been prepared for the hour, the day, the month, and the year were released to kill a third of mankind. The number of mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. That's 200 million. I heard their number. Well, there's only one or two armies that can pull that off in the world. It's either China or India. And, my money is on China. Skip down to verse 18, by these three plagues, a third of mankind was killed by the fire, smoke, and sulfur coming out of their mouths. So, a third of mankind, if you run the math on that, from all the death and destruction that takes place from the beginning of Revelation 6, you're probably looking at the neighborhood of about 2 billion people who will die at the hands of this 200 million mounted troops. So that's what it says. And this is something I'd posted on my website at paulthepoke.com. And it's from it's an excerpt from the Genesis record by Henry Morris. The biblical mention of a people in the Far East named Sinim. We get that from Isaiah 49:12, and that's up here at the top. Look, they come from far away. Look, some come from the north and west, others come from the land of Sinim. Genesis 10 also recognizes the Sinites. And together with references in ancient secular histories to the people in the Far East, called Sinai, at least suggests the possibility that some of Sin's descendants migrated eastward, while others went south into the land of Canaan. It is significant that the Chinese people have always been identified by the prefix Sino, Sino-Japanese War, Sinology, the study of Chinese history, etc. The name Sin is frequently encountered in Chinese names in the form of Siang or its equivalent. And Morris goes on to say the evidence is tenuous, but all of these names in the Table of Nations, it does seem that two sons of Canaan, Heth, Hittites, equal Cathay or Cathay. Anybody ever flown Cathay Pacific Airlines? And Sin, Sinites, Sinim equal China. So they are most likely to have become ancestors of the Oriental peoples, since it seems reasonable that divine inspiration would include in such a table information concerning the ancestry of all the major streams of human development. It is reasonable to conclude that the Mongoloid peoples, and therefore also the American Indians, have come from mostly the Hamitic or Ham line. So that is Henry Morris's conclusion from the Genesis record. The Sinites, Sinim, most likely China. And they're in the news big time, and this is building. And here we are, China's reunification with Taiwan, quote, will definitely be fulfilled. That would be President Xi Jinping makes this statement. And this was out of Sputnik, out of Russia. And only reason I chose this article, it had more quotes from President Xi than just about any other publication. The United States, just the Western press, threw up a quote looking to reunify Taiwan. Well, and that's all they would say. But Oleg Barunov from Sputnik, he quoted this thing quite a bit. Took President Xi's quotes. Has pledged, Xi Jinping has pledged that his country's peaceful reunification with Taiwan under a one country, two systems policy will definitely be implemented. Okay. Peaceful, of course. To achieve the reunification of the motherland by peaceful means is most in line with the overall interests of the Chinese nation, including our compatriots in Taiwan, Xi stressed. He urged Taiwan to, quote, stand on the right side of history jointly to create the glorious cause of the full reunification and the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Xi did not mention any country directly when he warned of foreign interference in the, quote, Taiwan issue. He says it's entirely China's internal affair, not that Taiwan has any opinion. And Xi would go on to further state no one should underestimate the Chinese people's determination and strong ability to defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity. The historical task of complete reunification of the motherland must be fulfilled, and it will definitely be fulfilled. Okay. And a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, some people think this will take place by 2025. Taiwan's president, Tsai Ing-wen, made a quote, whatever it takes to defend its freedom and democratic way of life. Now, Biden says he's standing by. He's going to stand by the Taiwanese people and not going to put up with any of that stuff from China invading um, Taiwan, which leads us to this. And here is a current arrangement of U.S. naval bases and installations in Asia Pacific. So just follow the grid up here. The yellow boxes, naval air facilities. Let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 that we have on this graph. Naval bases, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Diego Garcia's where the I think the stealth bombers, B-2 stealth bombers, are located. We have a naval station located in Australia and Indonesia. That may be Malaysia, not sure. And quote contract naval base, contract rented naval base. Lord knows how many of those are. As well, Thailand, Cambodia. Also, they do have some U.S. Army and Air Force resources in South Korea. And I think I saw somewhere where the United States has sent troops into Taiwan. I know I've read the United States has pulled Patriot missile battery resources out of Saudi Arabia and have relocated those to the Pacific Theater. Doesn't state where. So the United States is going east to the Pacific from the Middle East, and we're going to the east coast of Asia. And you think about this and this is back in 2018. This graph, this content's from 2018 from Geopolitical Futures. Sources, U.S. State Department, Military Times, IISS. So that's 3 years ago. I'm sure things have changed in the last 3 years, but this was the most current thing that I could find. Also makes you wonder, looking at the current military agreement between the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, those three have come together. We already have resources up in South Korea. And I know Australia sent some diplomats up to South Korea to engage in talks. The idea of getting together Australian and South Korean military forces for naval war games, practices, military operations, group effort sort of things. And full disclosure here, bald guy's opinion. This is where I think arguably you're going to see the 10-nation global federation arise. I think you look at the G7, United States, Canada, England, France, Germany, Italy, I think Spain, I'm missing one. At any rate, those 7 plus South Korea, Australia, India. And that makes sense because then you would have China literally surrounded on the east southwest flank as well. And then, of course, north of China is Russia. So, sure, they're furious with what's going on. In the backdrop of all of this stuff, China has $62 trillion property market. And as you can see, the Chinese prefer real estate as their primary asset of wealth accumulation, whereas in the United States, we're mostly looking at fixed income bonds and stocks is how we measure most of our wealth accumulation. The stocks and bonds, how Americans do it primarily. But not China, up to 62 trillion in assets. It's the largest asset class in the world. And then they've got their issues with Evergrande not paying down debt. So we will be keeping our eyes on China. And then from China, we're going to go to Lebanon. Um, Lebanon's electricity was down for a day. Here's a picture of Lebanese electrical infrastructure. That's from June of 2021. And again, for those of you not familiar, Lebanon is on the northern border of Israel. So when you look at this country of Lebanon, the whole country, it wasn't a neighborhood or two in Beirut or Tripoli or whatever. It was the entire country. The entire country went dark. They ran out of fuel. And by all accounts, their electrical grid, you look at an example of it in Beirut, is run by diesel generators or diesel electrical plants. So most people, if they had generators, they were able to supply some electricity for themselves. And this is a tweet out of Sky News. Lebanon's electricity grid shut down entirely after the country's two main power stations ran out of fuel, and that'd be diesel. And so that's a lot of the concern. Hezbollah is trying to get fuel, diesel, from Iran to run these electrical plants. City was completely dark. And this is from somebody who lives in Lebanon. Lebanon now has zero state power, meaning the entire country is running on private generators. They are prohibitively expensive. My last month's bill was 3.75 million lira, or about $2,500 a month for electricity. Can you imagine if you opened up your mailbox or you got some email from your local power country or company and you owe $2,500 this month? Can you imagine what would happen in the United States if that were to take place? At best, 250 on the black market. Again, hyperinflation, and this is a theme. We're going to talk a little bit about this later, but here's an example of hyperinflation in Lebanon, just north of Israel. Big mess. So if you want to check out more details, and this just talks about Lebanon's economic crisis, political corruption. They're effectively leaderless. Hezbollah is probably the closest thing to any kind of leadership. They're in bed with Iran. Their lira continues to get pounded, roughly 19,000 lira per dollar on the black market. So again, hyperinflation in regards to electricity, fuel, food, medicine, staples, crazy expensive. And again, these people, I mean, $2,500 electrical bill would be crippling to people in the United States. And you know darn good and well these folks in Lebanon do not experience the quality of life we experience here in the West. They just don't. So there is a lot of hardship and suffering that is taking place currently in Lebanon. But this is from Vox, and it's just Lebanon's a mess. And the latest example, no electricity. You can tell there's no organized effort here with electrical lines. And from Lebanon, we're going to go to the Caucasus. And we care about the Caucasus because of Ezekiel 38 and 39. And here are our primary players. We want to keep our eyes on Azerbaijan, Iran, Armenia, Turkey, and we got Mother Russia to the north. But for the point of this article, and talk about politics having strange bedfellows. This makes your head hurt to try to understand this, but we're going to take a shot at it. Geopolitical power struggle in the Caucasus is growing, increasingly militarized as converging interests pit Iran and Armenia together. Okay, so review. This is where things get crazy. Iran, Shia Muslim, Armenia, primarily Christian. Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey. That would be Muslim Brotherhood, Islam, or Sunni, and Israel, Jewish, Judaism. Okay. So we take a look at a map of this situation. Iran, Azerbaijan, Turkey on one side, Armenia. I'm sorry, I blew that big time. Iran, Armenia on one side, Azerbaijan, Turkey together, Azerbaijan with Israel. Turkey's not okay with that. Russia, primarily in the past, has been allied with Armenia. I'm probably going to continue to side with Armenia and Iran. But very interesting, and at some point, all of this has to kind of coalesce under the leadership of Magog, which I believe to be modern day Russia. And I know some people will argue with me about that and say, no, it's Turkey. But somebody, I believe it'll be Gog of Magog, which, again, a leader from Russia, is going to unite and lead all of this. They're going to come together under one leader and decide to come down here to the Golan Heights and try to come into Israel from the north. That's what Ezekiel 38 and 39 says. But you look at the current situation, it's like, well, how's that going to happen? But again, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey began 5 days of military exercises, to enhance their preparedness to protect regional economic projects. Sure, the security of the Baku Tbilisi Ceyhan oil pipeline. So again, comes back to money. Is the reason for this. You can read this if you want to get into the details of it. Iran's all hot to trot because they think Israel has resources in Azerbaijan. And so they are not allowing any Zionist entity near their border. So they are convinced Israel's got something going in Azerbaijan. I do think I saw where Israel dispatched a couple of F-35s to Azerbaijan. I'm not sure. Probably ought to confirm that, but I'm reasonably sure I saw that somewhere this past week. And so we'll leave the Caucuses, and we're going to go to Revelation 6. And I mentioned this earlier in regards to the happenings in Lebanon and the idea of hyperinflation. We're going to take specifically Revelation 6, verse 5. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come," and I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hands. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine." So a denarius would be a day's wage during the time of John, the Apostle John, disciple John, who wrote Revelation from Patmos. So a day's wage for wheat, a quart of wheat, or a day's wage for a couple of quarts of barley. So that's about how much food it would take, or 3 quarts of barley, to feed a family. Do not harm the oil and wine. Don't mess with the wealthy. Those are oil and wine are those who have, compared to wheat and barley, the common folk, but the rich have the oil and wine. Don't harm them just yet. And that probably gives us some insight as to what's getting ready to take place, and what's all of this stuff boil down to. All of these conflicts has to do with the flow of oil and gas to Western Europe. Russia is restricting natural gas supplies, cutting it by anywhere from 2/3 to 3/4, driving the price of natural gas up, and leading to inflation. Again, can you imagine if you live in Europe and your electrical bill is 2 to 4 times what it typically is, or your natural gas bill is 2 to 4 times what it typically is? And we got winter coming. We're early in the fall. It hasn't turned cold yet. But again, just more signs of hyperinflation. China's got a mess on their hands in regards to electrical infrastructure. So their prices for commodities, electricity, going up. Here's a chart to take a look at natural gas. And this is measured in dollars. What's taking place in Europe a year ago at this time was roughly 490. Today, 2284. So you're over 4 times what it was a year ago, and it's still going up. And there's been no real demand needs yet because of the weather. It hasn't gotten really cold to where they're consuming a lot of natural gas or converting natural gas to electricity in power plants. So this is going to go higher. And you got countries, governments around the world printing currency like there's no tomorrow, just being crazy about it. And then we got the backdrop moving to the United States, and this is actually being discussed. And this is ABC News. Again, I like to pull these resources from mainstream media just so the idea is, look, these people are actually talking about this stuff as a legitimate news story, minting a $1 trillion platinum coin. Hey, I know, let's print a $1 trillion coin and we'll solve our debt limit crisis. Now, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen shot down the idea, calling it a gimmick. Well, we got people talking about it. ABC News is given time to it. I mean, they've already have a plan in place and a stamped where all they got to do is stamp this little bad boy out in platinum, and we just created $1 trillion. And legislation, ABC, according to ABC News, legislation enacted in 2001 allows the Treasury to mint platinum coins of any value without congressional approval. Under the law, the coin's value could be anything, but it would have to be platinum, not gold or silver, nickel, bronze, or copper, which are under Congress's control. But Congress has no control over platinum, so they can do whatever they want. So, in theory, President Biden could order Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen to have a coin with the value of 1 trillion or 2 trillion or 5 trillion or whatever, and just stamp that thing out and deposit it into the Treasury. And just like that, an extra $1 trillion to cover any debts and prevent default. I mean, and this whole thing's a joke anyway. The United States is not going to default. The Democrats control the House and the Senate, and we're arguing over, are we going to spend $1 or $3.5 trillion in our next budget? They're not going. These people love printing money, and the Republicans don't care either. They're on board. They're not trying to stop it. They wanted to raise the debt ceiling. Now McConnell's grandstanding and saying, "Nope, I'm done with that." Well, whatever, he'll cave too, because they're not about to go default and have that happen while they were standing watch. They'll kick the can. They'll kick the can down the road and let somebody else deal with it, like a typical politician. So both parties are on board with this. And again, Janet Yellen says she's opposed to it. She's not going to let it watch on her. She's not going to let it happen on her watch either. She'll be all for it. It's really gimmicky. She sounds tough. Push comes to shove. I think they've kicked the can down down to December now. I don't know. They're not defaulting. It's not going to happen. And we're going to close with this is out of CNBC. This is kind of stunning. World leaders reach landmark deal on a global corporate tax rate. So, a bunch of countries have gotten together. Breakthrough comes after changes were made to the original text. A rate of 15% will not be increased at a later date, that small businesses will not be hit with new rates. But the group of developed nations agreed to a global minimum corporate tax rate of 15%. The landmark deal, agreed by 136 countries and jurisdictions representing more than 90% of global GDP, will also allocate more than 125 billion US dollars of profits from around 100 of the world's largest and most profitable companies to countries worldwide, ensuring that these firms pay a fair share of tax. That's right, they must be fair wherever they operate and generate profits. So, this was last Friday. Notice our representative from the United States, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. He is not wearing his COVID mask. I'm a little disappointed in him, while all these others are sitting up here like good global citizens wearing their masks. This is not helping the image of the United States. I'm a little disappointed in him, but that's another topic for another day. And this is at a closing session at the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. Sounds very official. Took place in Paris, October 6, 2021. So everybody's on board. Let's tax these big multinational companies 15%. We'll distribute these funds accordingly. I'm sure we'll argue, fuss, and fight over that, but we're going to soak those countries. We got a couple years to figure this out. This isn't supposed to take place till 2023 when it's enforced. And U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said this is a once-in-a-generation accomplishment for economic diplomacy. Yay. She applauded nations who decided to end the race to the bottom on corporate taxation. And that's what was bothering the United States. These smaller countries were lowering their tax rates, and we're losing out on businesses. So tax flows were coming out of the United States, which I'm sure had a major impact on how this all finally got done. Trump had kind of ended that. He went to compete with some of these countries and gave some of these companies better deals. I love this statement from Yellen. International tax policy making is a complex issue, but the arcane language of today's agreement belies how simple and sweeping these stakes are. When this deal is enacted, Americans will find the global economy a much easier place to land a job, earn a living, or scale a business. Now, never mind, we have more jobs available than unemployed people. That's not going to change anything. So, if you guys want to check out the details of this, go to cnbc.com. OECD reaches deal on corporate tax after Ireland agrees. So apparently Ireland was a big power broker or had some complaints about this, but we're through that now. And kumbaya, the world is coming together in the name of taxes. Sign of the time, global economy. Eventually, we know where this is going. We will have a global currency. You won't be able to participate unless you have a mark. That happens in the last 3.5 years of the tribulation. We're seeing signs of some of those things start to happen right now over these vaccinations with COVID. You know, if you don't take the jab and you don't have your little QR code, you will not be allowed to participate in the vaccinated economy. What do we got? 40 countries on board with that as of a week ago. So this stuff's changing quick. pay attention. And with that, I'll close on This Week in Prophecy. I'd like to thank everybody for following along at valortube.com. And this is a plug on this, too. I know lots of people are out there who are tired of being censored. You're not going to be censored at ValorTube. So share the website with other folks. Come to valortube.com. And I appreciate you following along. And we'll catch you next week on This Week in Prophecy. Thanks a lot. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.